Good morning. My name is Mike, in case you've forgotten. It's been a great summer. I've really enjoyed kind of a new perspective. I get to do this most of the summer, but a perspective on our church, to just really kind of immerse myself in being a part of the church, hearing and listening and participating with a lot of our other staff. A lot of our staff are probably glad I'm back to preaching because I won't be barging in their office all the time asking what they're doing. Which is fun. It's mostly curious. We have great staff who work extremely hard. And I hope that you have enjoyed all the various voices we've heard all summer in the series Storyline. Laura Lynn and Carson and Clay and Jeff, they did a great job. So thank you guys for being a part. Did I forget anybody? And so I get to pick up today and drop in on the storyline. And today we're going to really drop in kind of real quickly on Jesus at the Last Supper, but we're going to drop in on sort of the implications of the Lord's Supper in the early church as they're trying to sort out how they're going to do things. This will kind of set up even next week as well. But today we're going to be taking communion, and the invitation is to take and eat. That's the idea that Jesus was giving to us in communion. That's how we receive it today, that Jesus is inviting us to take and eat. And the story of the Bible could be bookended between these two ideas, or this statement of take and eat. It was the original temptation in the garden to take and eat of the forbidden fruit. It was the temptation to say that God is holding back on you and will not give you all that you could have. So why don't you take it for yourself? And then we move right before this sort of final declaration of Jesus where he would say, "It is finished." And he invites his disciples to take and eat, and he rewrites or reestablishes one of the longest running religious feasts or festivals or ordinances in the history of the world that comes to us today. And so some of you are here, communion, you grew up in different traditions. You've heard it called communion, the Lord's Supper, the Lord's table, Holy Eucharist, a lot of different terminologies. It all means the same thing. It all comes from the same place. But people have done it very differently. For some of you, this brings an enormous amount of sort of nostalgia because you remember your first communion. Some of you, right, your first communion was this confirmation class or this series of classes that you had to go through and check boxes and say, am I qualified for communion? And then maybe you deconstructed your entire way of thinking because you haven't thought about it since. So it just represents maybe some bad taste in your mouth, right? Not just that the wafer was bad, but just like a real bad taste in your mouth. And so some of you have grown up where you couldn't take this if it weren't a priest. I've been in places where I had to cross my hands because I was not able to take communion in those places. And so all this is a part of what your experience is today as we gather and we share communion together. What I want to make very clear is we believe that we do take communion from a priest. It is the high priest that is Jesus, the final mediator, that we don't need anything else to go before God when he says he is the high priest, and we can approach the throne of grace with confidence. That is how we are extending that invitation to you today. And I want to give some context for it. I remember growing up taking communion. I grew up in a Baptist tradition, and we did communion 4 times a year. And we did it on Sunday nights when no one was at church. We would do it, but there was always, it was always like a ceremony in it. There was, the men came forward and they took the white cloths off in these big silver things. We did this responsive readings. I remember being like 10, 11, 12 years old. We did this responsive readings, and one of the responsive readings, I still remember this, it's ingrained in my brain. And we would respond back and say, whoever eats of this bread or drinks of this cup in an unworthy manner drinks damnation into themselves. I remember thinking, that was probably when it's like damnation was not a word I was allowed to use, and I could say it in church. And secondly, I'm 10 years old, and I'm going, dude, if I do this wrong, the stakes are high. Do you feel that? Like you even hear it, and you're like, whoa. And so this is how this comes to us. As we're trying to figure out, what do we do with this? How do you drink this in a worthy manner? So today when we gather, it's a little, we'll have ours, and it comes in a little plastic cup, and there's 2 parts, and there's the bread on the bottom and the cup on the top, and you'll get that in just a little bit. So it's a little bit of an odd thing that we do. If you just walked in, you're like, what are we doing? It's a little bit, we just acknowledge that, but there's a richness to it that I want for us to enter into. So it's gonna take some imagination, it's gonna take a willingness on all of our parts to do this. Because what this is about is sort of about reorienting ourselves. It's about participating, and it's especially about participating together. It's about embodying something, which we don't do very well. It's about using our physical bodies to connect ourselves to spiritual realities and to connect ourselves to community and to others, and most importantly, to God. You get to consider your own faith and what you believe. You get to do that. You get to say what you believe about Jesus and confess and profess those things. We're gonna do that together, but it happens in you and me personally. One of the things that I always work on when I'm talking or preaching, I don't ever think about creating content. That's a new thing. I think about helping people. And the single most important question that I have to answer every time I stand up here and deliver anything about this is, do I buy this? Do I buy it? Do I believe this? Do I trust it? Because I can entertain people and say clever things and find clever things in the Bible, but the single most important thing is, do I buy this? Am I really willing to put my life, invest my life in this and do something about what I'm learning and saying and thinking and trusting and hoping? And so we get to do that today. Sorry, it's been a long time. I feel a little bit of a, yeah. And the second thing is we're doing this together. It is a way for us to enter into sharing communion. And this is more important than we can understand today. The sense of community and the corporate nature of this is so important, but this is really important in the meal. So I want to give you a couple observations about the meal. I want us to pay attention to why we're doing this. And I want us to get to a place, hopefully this morning, where we are receiving communion. And so to enter into this requires us to understand some things today and why this is so important for us. Number one is the significance of a meal and the way Jesus would do this. And we'll talk more about Passover in just a minute. But it was a leveling place. It was a place where everything was level. There was no distinction between rich or poor, or between men or women, or any other delineation that the world would sort of ascribe. There was no delineation. One of the things is I've been preparing for communion today, this is not Mike as a pastor standing up and trying to be a good leader. It's about all of us entering into the same place in the same way and leveling out. So we are all the same in this. It's a leveling place. We all come, there's no distinction. And we'll see why this is important in just a minute. Number two is it's a common place, right? It's here we celebrate both abundant provision and also a declaration of dependence. That there is no other way to satisfy your hunger and your thirst than to eat or to drink. No matter how rich or how poor you are, no matter how cool or uncool, no matter how powerful or not you are, you have to satisfy those things in the exact same way. It's a common space. It's a place where we show up, regardless of where we're from or how we've shown up here. We're now in this place together doing the same thing in the same way. And then third, it's a family space. One of the reasons that I believe we should gather as a church is because, and I hear this all the time. I've been doing this for 25 years and people still say this to me. So Mike, I'd come to your church, but the walls would probably fall down. And you know what that means, right? They've done some things, they're so bad that if they came in here, the whole thing would crumble on them. And there's been a lot of, I'm sure, people worse than you who've been in here, right? And the walls have not fallen down. And what we want you to understand is when you show up here, and people greet you and say hello to you, and we welcome you, and we say these kinds of things, we mean it because it is tangible acceptance. People walk in here all the time and feel like they have been rejected in all the other places of their lives, and they come in here expecting to be rejected often or at times. And so you walk in here and you realize that, oh, you're not. In fact, you're welcome here, and it's sort of tangible acceptance, and it's the extension of the opportunity to belong. We're gonna talk more about this next week. But it's a family space. When my kids' friends show up at our table, they are treated like family. They're just welcome there. They belong there. They're supposed to be there. And that's what we want you to feel and sense that today. N.T. Wright, who's one of my favorite theologians, he says this, and I love this. He says, when Jesus wanted to explain to his disciples what his impending death was about, he didn't give them a theory or a lecture. He gave them a meal. This is just like Jesus. If you were to sort of think, what would you want to know about what Jesus' death means? Wouldn't you just love for him to have given you like a real clear like paragraph or Instagram post about what this means? Instead of going, here's the bread, it's my body broken for you, and here's the cup, it's the cup in the new covenant, and we're just left to figure it out. So that's what we're gonna try to do today in the time that we have remaining. Jesus didn't just use a meal to delay this. He used a very specific meal. He used Passover. Passover, I've spent a lot of time reading. It starts in Exodus chapter 12. And it's when the Israelites, the Hebrew people, are being led out of Egypt after 400 plus years in slavery. So they've been, their population grew. They were enslaved by Pharaoh in Egypt. Moses grows up. If you know the story, he goes, runs into some trouble, goes to Midian, and he comes back to let my people go. That's what he's supposed to say if you've seen the movie. Let my people go. And Pharaoh doesn't do it, so God sends 10 successive plagues to compel Pharaoh. And the last plague is that a destroyer would come through Egypt and kill all the firstborn. This is like serious stuff. And the Israelites are instructed, the Hebrew people are instructed to take a lamb, a Passover lamb, and to slaughter that lamb and to prepare a meal. And it's gonna happen so quickly that they're told, don't put any leaven in the bread. You don't have time for that. Just pack it up, because you gotta be ready to go. They're to slaughter the lamb, and then they take the blood of the lamb, and they take a branch, and they mark it over the door frames of their homes, and the destroyer would pass over their homes. And so this happens. There's a wailing in Egypt, the scriptures describe as hasn't been heard before nor since, as they discover the plague of death in Egypt. And Pharaoh says, get the people out of here. And so they leave, and he tells them that on this particular day of the month, every year you're to celebrate the Passover to commemorate God's deliverance or his exodus, or literally the way out. So this is really important. That's what they're celebrating. So this goes on for centuries. The Jewish people celebrate Passover. Just like you would celebrate Thanksgiving or Christmas, you all have traditions. This is the same kind of idea. It was a rich meal, lots of preparations, used the same dishes. I mean, all the things that were there. And they would do this year after year after year. So Jesus picks this day and this meal to reorient them to what's about to happen. In fact, what you see, and this is really fascinating to me, as Jesus is coming in Jerusalem, there's several events that happen, and again, this is all through the Gospels. Jesus is, he's telling them, hey, I'm going to Jerusalem and I'm going to die. He's telling this, and they're like, this is a terrible idea, Jesus. You were like, you're on the upswing, man, people, your popularity, so, your Instagram followers are like, we can really make something, like you could be an influencer here if you just play this right. And dying is not a great strategy. And he says, no, this is what I'm here to do. I've come to give my life a ransom for many. And then there's this one scene, it's called the Transfiguration, where they go up on this mountain, and Jesus glows. And then next to him show up Elijah and Moses. You might have heard this. This is found in Luke chapter 9. And it's actually found in Mark and Matthew and also Luke. But Luke gives us a glimpse into what they were talking about. So here's how it reads. So they go up there, they share this extraordinary experience. Jesus is transformed into light, and then these two men show up. And here's how it reads in Luke chapter 9. Starting in verse 30. Two men, Moses and Elijah, appeared in glorious splendor, talking with Jesus. So James and Peter and John are watching this. This is cool. You're like, what is going on? We were like in between worlds. They spoke about his departure. Sorry, try it again. Departure. Which he was about to bring, this departure that he was about to bring to fulfillment at Jerusalem. So he's about to complete departure. Do you know what the literal word is? The way out. They're talking about deliverance. So then what happens is they come down, they get to Passover, and they're having Passover, and the Passover meal is about the Exodus, it's about the way out, it's about the way in which God delivered them out of the bondage that they were in. And at the end of this meal, Jesus picks up the bread and he breaks the bread and he says, "This is my body which is broken for you." And they're like, "We have not heard this before." Think about being at family dinner, and all of a sudden the crazy uncle starts to say something that you're like, "Dude, just zip it, don't do this, don't do this. We've been doing this for 20 years, don't try to change this." That's exactly what Jesus did. Like, we've heard this our whole lives, and now you're doing this. This is the cup of my blood of the new covenant. You're like, what in the world does this mean? Now, you would go back and they would write all this in time and understand this more and more and more. But they had very little understanding what this meant when they're sharing this together. What we do know is that after Jesus' death and subsequent resurrection, this meal, this Passover meal, the Lord's Supper, the Holy Eucharist, becomes a part of what happens when the Jesus followers would gather together. They would share this meal. And what we have is just, 15, 20 years later is this happening in these gatherings of these local congregations or assemblies of Jesus followers meeting together. And what they're doing is, because some of them have power and some of them don't, they're using this meal to sort of create the same divisions that everybody experiences everywhere else. And Paul has had it. So Paul writes him a letter. This is found in 1 Corinthians, and he opens this section up and he says, "It has come to my attention that your meetings, when you gather together, you create more harm than good." Now, there are places like that, right? There are churches we've been in where them gathering together is more harm than it is good. Sometimes meetings are like that. You get together, it's more harm than good. This is what he's saying. You guys can't be together because y'all keep doing dumb things and creating systems that no one can participate in. You keep creating catch-22s. You keep perpetuating the same problems that everyone else is experiencing. It's supposed to be different in here. And what you begin to realize is what was happening in the early church, and really what comes to us today, and why this is so important for us to identify with this ancient practice, is because we are confessing and saying that we ascribe to what was intended in the beginning. We are confessing and professing that. And so Paul writes this really kind of pretty direct letter to them after this. And he tells us, gives us just again glimpses into what is happening when they do and they take the Lord's Supper. So this is in we'll get to the unworthy part in just a minute. Don't worry, that's coming. 1 Corinthians chapter 11. Paul says, after he's just basically said, you guys get together and you create divisions and you perpetuate things, and he's pretty ticked. And so then Paul comes and he's talking directly about them sharing this meal, this Passover, and commemorating what Jesus did. "For I received from the Lord what I also passed on to you." So Paul's going like, I received this from Jesus, and I'm trying to help you guys understand why this is important. "The Lord Jesus, on the night that he was betrayed, he took bread, and when he had given thanks, he broke it. And he said, 'This is my body,'" right, "which is for you. Do this in remembrance of me." And he would explain that this idea that the body, the bread was a symbol of life and provision, right? If you were a Hebrew, a Jewish person commemorating Passover, you knew about the manna in the wilderness, that this was like life source. And so Jesus is saying, that's what I am. I am this life source. I am this provision, right? My life is now your life. That's what he's saying. And then he continues on. In the same way, after the supper, he took the cup and he says, "The cup is the new covenant of my blood. Do this whenever you drink it in remembrance of me." So it's a new covenant. Every Jewish person who heard that would understand that this was a reference to Jeremiah, the prophet Jeremiah. And Jeremiah would say, there's a new covenant coming where you will be our God and we will be your people, where we will no longer, right, need a mediator between us, for we will have access to you. We will know you, is the phrase. And he says that our sin will be forgiven and you will remember our sins no more. They understood this. So Jesus is saying, this is now coming. This is now here. This is what's about to happen in this death. So whenever you eat this bread and drink this cup, you proclaim the Lord's death until he comes. And I always remember trying to think about this and saying, this feels kind of sadistic. Because what I knew was that I'm proclaiming his death till he comes, and if I drink this in an unworthy way, I'm drinking damnation into myself. I'm just thinking it's better for me not to do this. And we just have to enter into this place. To proclaim his death is to proclaim what Jesus came to do, the way in which he lived, and the love that he brought. That's what we're pushing, that his death is good news for us because that's what gives us our life. That's what brings us into this reconciled relationship for which we have been created and intended. And so we sort of put this in there. And so when we were talking about communion, they weren't just sort of doing this by rote, going, oh, eat this bread, here you go, drink this cup, hey, cheers. They were really entering into a story of deliverance, of God's way out of bondage. In fact, Paul's mentor was a rabbi named Gamaliel. And Gamaliel was a famous teacher in the time of Christ and a rabbi, and again was probably responsible for a lot of Paul's brilliance and expertise in learning. And he said this, and this is how the Jewish people of that day would have thought about communion. In every generation, a person is obligated to show himself as if he had left Egypt. For God did not only redeem our ancestors, but even us as well. And what he's saying is you aren't just identifying with something ancient. You're saying this actually happened to me. And so that's what I want for us to do. God has delivered us. He has delivered us. What Jesus did for us was brought forgiveness for sin and a restoration of the life for which we've been created for. That the bread would be provision and life itself. And the cup would be a promise that you can rest on and build your life upon. I just did a wedding last night, and I told them, I said, what a marriage is it's a covenant. But it just means it's a promise. And to live in a relationship where a promise governs means that you have to be a kind of person who can trust and be trusted. It's not hard, it's not complicated. And what God has said is, I am that kind of God and you will be my people. I've made a way out of the bondage, and that's what we're entering into, that's what we're remembering, that's what we're participating in. So Paul says, you proclaim the Lord's death till he comes, and then he says this, so then, whoever eats the bread or drinks the cup, and here's the word, in an unworthy manner, will be guilty of sinning against what? The body and the blood of the Lord. The challenge then is everyone ought to examine themselves before they eat and drink. So this is a serious thing. This isn't casual. But what you're not doing, and this is what I want to get really clear. What you're not doing is trying to figure out, are you worthy, are you good enough for God? The thing that makes me absolutely crazy about a lot of what we hear is that, depravity and human sin, and that you are so bad and you are so wicked and you are so undeserving. People always ask me, do you believe in God's unconditional love? And it's like, no, I do not. God's love is conditional. Do you know what the condition of his love is? The condition of his love is that he made you and he created you, and that is why he loves you. That is why he came for us. By the essence that you breathe and you are here means implicitly that you are worthy of God's pursuit of you. So when he talks about drinking this in an unworthy manner, what is he talking about? How do you think? Because I used to think about, like, have I committed any sins? Have I said any bad words? Is there any impure thoughts in my head, right? Have y'all done this before? Trying to sort this out, man. I don't want damnation drunk into me, right? And so I'm trying to figure out, how do you do this? Like, what does this mean for us? And so I was trying to think about a way to talk about this. And think about if you were at Thanksgiving, I don't know what meal your family has. It's like super formal. Ours is always Christmas Eve. It was the same dishes, the same meal in the same dishes for 35, 40 years. Like it was every meal was like this. And we sat in the same spots, and as the family grew, you had the kids' table, and then eventually you got grown up enough to be at the kids, all the things, but it was the same thing. Now imagine, so my mom and my dad have worked hard to prepare this meal, and we're participating in this to say we belong to this family. And so I walk in, I'm like, you know what? Mom, thanks for the turkey, the gravy, the mashed potatoes that you made. I'm gonna go sit and eat this in front of the TV and watch football. Would you consider that a worthy manner of taking that meal or an unworthy manner of taking that meal? Unworthy, right? And so what you're trying to do, or I just got in there and said, I sit on a table, I pop my AirPods in, and I got my phone up, and just the whole time to make it a little bit more relevant. Is it worthy? Are we partaking this in a worthy manner or an unworthy manner? So then he asks us to examine ourselves. Let's keep going. For those who eat and drink without discerning the body of Christ, without discerning what? The body of Christ. What is he talking about here? Do you remember how this began? Whenever you gather together, you cause more harm than good. You are the body of Christ. Whoever eats and drinks without concerning us eats and drink judgment upon themselves. And then he just says, that's why some of you are weak and sick and have died. So what do we do with this? You're like, are you gonna tell us? So, if I grab my Thanksgiving meal that everybody has worked on, that's sort of an invitation of belonging to me for the family, and I take it and I eat it in an unworthy manner by going and sitting somewhere else, and now I'm asked to examine myself. What am I examining? I'm examining what is it about me that is so indifferent about them. I'm examining what is it about me that thinks that this is how I ought to live my life, and to examine what is my actual relationship to the people that I belong to. That's what he's asking us. It's not about have you said a bad word this week or this month or this minute. It's about what's happening in you. This is about deliverance and bondage and freedom. And that what we're discerning is this idea. And what he's saying is that it's the implications of our indifference to other people causes harm. When we continue to create the divisions and separate, that's what this was about. The divisions and the separations between people. We perpetuate harm and we drink judgment. We just make ourselves irrelevant and they're just like everybody else. We just pronounce this on ourselves. Listen to the command in the end. This is what I wish. When people ask me all the time, so Mike, what's the biggest problem in the church? It is the lack of our capacity to discern anything. We fall for everything. We fall for the latest politician who says, we're gonna bring God back in, and we just jump on it. Or this latest little thing that happens, we read stuff or hear stuff on TikTok or Instagram, and we run around and say, this is true, and this is true, and this is true, without discerning the body. Without understanding the implications of what you believe and think and how you are and the attitudes that you and I hold. To believe things about other people is a serious thing. And that's what he's asking, that's what he's inviting us into. This is precisely what he says at the end. Verse 31, but if we were more discerning with regard to ourselves, things would be so much different. That's my paraphrase. And so that's what I want for us to do. I don't want you to feel guilty or unworthy of being here, because you're not. You're worthy of belonging in this community. There are responsibilities with that, but you are worthy. That's not in question. So to drink this in an unworthy manner is not about whether you have done something or not. It's what you believe about God's invitation to you. If I take the table and myself, I go, why are you leaving? Because I don't belong here. They're like, no, you belong here. No, I don't. Yes, you do. Well, you don't know what I've done. We actually do. Right? Parents aren't dumb. And what I have to decide is, am I willing to take this in a worthy manner, which means to trust the invitation that has been given. When Jesus took the bread and he said, this is my body, which is broken for you. Do you know what he did? He brought forgiveness and deliverance to you from the bondage of sin and death and guilt and shame. That's what he did. It is hard to believe and harder to trust, but that's what he did. So here's what we're gonna do. When we do this, we're actually reenacting, we're celebrating this new creation, this new Passover, this new thing that's happened as new creatures. And you've got to pressure test your own faith. Some of you are here, and you're not sure what you believe about Jesus. You are welcome to hold on to this. You're welcome to bring it up to us after the service. You're welcome to take it to the Connect. You're welcome to do whatever you need to do with it, to say, I've got questions. I want to wrestle through this. We welcome that. But you were invited to participate with us today. But we're confessing our sins and our need for grace. Lord, we depend on ourselves and we don't trust you always. We're confessing those things and we're professing that we need God's grace. We're professing our dependency and our equality and our commonality and our unity. And in fact, when we take and eat and drink together, we're actually experiencing that reality as we do it together. And so I wrote this and I want to say this as we confess the things that undermine our humanity. That's what we're confessing. All the barbs and the separation and the divisions and the egos and the pride and the way we take advantage of one another and compete with one another and compare ourselves with one another. We're just saying, Lord, these are all problematic to the kind of life that you've intended for us to live. And then we're going to profess the things that restores and redeems our humanity. We want to confess our tendency towards independence, that you can't trust other people. We have to confess those things. So, Lord, this is the evidence, this is my tendency. I want to confess that it's hard for me to trust other people. I want to confess our tendency to indulge. Whenever things have been hard or stressful, one of my things is like, I just need to escape and indulge myself in something that just, right? And indulgence takes on all kinds of different means in our lives and pursuits. I want to confess, like, Lord, this is where I just take advantage of others or opportunities without regard for how it might affect someone else. We profess our dependency and our trust. And so in just a moment, our host teams are going to come and distribute the meal, the elements, the bread and the cup. I want to put two questions on the screen as our confession, as your confession, as my confession. And maybe just in your journal on your phone, maybe in your physical journal or just in your mind. In what ways do I just seem unwilling to depend upon God's provision and to trust his way? And number two, in what ways do I tend to depend upon and demand my own way? Like, how does this work? That as we take communion together, we remember God's work to deliver us. We reorient our lives, declaring our allegiance to Jesus and the fact that we belong to his body. And that it's here in this moment, this place, that we renew our hope, our deep hope and a longing for redemption, both personally, that God would redeem you, and then collectively, that he would redeem us, and out of that he would use us to bring redemption and the hope of redemption into the world. It's an honor for us, for those of us who will be distributing this, to serve our congregation in this way. So Jesus, we gather and we hear your invitation to take and eat. And so we do this in remembrance of you. But before that, we want to examine ourselves so as not to eat or drink in an unworthy manner. And again, this isn't about what I have done or haven't done. In this moment, it's about, do I believe that you have claimed to me as worthy of your love? And you demonstrated that on the cross. So I'm free to confess and to wrestle with the things that sort of hold me and keep me in bondage. And to bring those into the light for healing and for hope and for redemption. So use these next few moments to that end. And I pray all this in the name of your Son, in the name of The invitation to take and eat is such a simple one. When someone's sitting at your table and you say, hey, eat up, right? It's just, everybody knows how to do it. It's very accessible. And it's the original temptation in the garden that would undermine everything that God intended. This, the breach of trust that would destroy everything and create every division and separation that we've experienced, every brokenness. And so Jesus comes along and he says, I want you to take and eat and to enter into the opposite trajectory towards life and hope and healing. And one of the things I used to wrestle with when I was trying to figure out if I could take communion or not is, do I believe this and promise to do this perfectly for the rest of my life? The reality is that's not what you're doing here. You're trusting that what Jesus has done is sufficient, and that the faith you have in that right now is sufficient. And that's what you need, and that's all you need. But it is that he took the bread and he raised it up and he said, this is my body which is broken for you. And here's what it means: to trust and receive that you have been forgiven. Period. Made right. Life available. We have been forgiven. And so we take and we eat. And then he took the cup and he said, this is the cup of the promise. And this is where it gets a little serious. Because to receive forgiveness means that we want to learn to live as those who have been forgiven. To learn to live rightly related to the one whom we've been reconciled to. And it's interesting, the invitation at the end of Revelation is, to all who are thirsty, come and drink. Like, the essence of the invitation is, do you want to be alive? This is the cup of the promise of the life that Jesus came to bring to us. So we do this in remembrance of him.